Web Weavers and the Emerald Sisters for having me on. My name is Mark Abadi, and this is the scientific basis of energy medicine, the biophysics of consciousness. Now, there's quite a lot to go through, so once I find my slides, which I've now lost somewhere here. Oh, and we are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and various other platforms. But I definitely, there we go. Okay, good. Lost my preview. I'll find it, don't worry. It's on your screens, you can see it. That's the title. I'm just trying to find that title myself. Okay, good, got it. See how it flicked? So what I'm going to present to you now is a kind of an all-round introduction to the scientific basis of energy medicine. If you want more, you can find it in my book Evolve, bookevolve.com. There'll be more references at the end. So let's get on, because we've only got an hour, and this is usually a 2-day immersion. So let's go. A little bit about me. I am a wellness wizard. I teach meditation. I'm a therapist, so I do body work. And what I started my studies of psychology, I got 2 degrees in psychology, and oh yeah, I've got the same top on. What I started to realize is that inside the notion of the psyche, there was something missing from it. There was some heart missing, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. So I went into alternative therapies after the psychology to try and understand this aspect of information, of energy moving. And I started to become aware of signals moving to and fro between client and therapist. And I couldn't explain what these were, so I started to research, and hence the story of energy medicine is born in me and my study of it. Right now I'm doing coaching and I do event production. I'm also an author, the book Evolve, book Evolve, that way. And I do media production. Cool, so you can find out about me, markabadi.com. Onwards. Albert Sven-Yorgi, who was one of the most profound people, he said, in every culture, in every medical tradition before ours, healing was accomplished by moving energy. Now we're going to see why that's important. Here we've got the body system, we've got the muscular system, we've got the lymphatic system, and then we've got the connective tissue, the collagen fibers. We're going to get onto all of this. Remember, this is your introduction to get a full dose of it, and you're going to go off and read wider. So here, this is Alex Gray's depiction of how the muscular system, the body system, moves into this energetic system, the chakra system, and then moves further into the aura system. And of course, the auras and chakras by the medical model have been reduced to, hokey-cokey, bewitchery stuff that's not real. But what I'm going to show you is it's very much real, and we have scientific data to validate it. And it really actually isn't debated whether the fields of the body are real or not. We'll get onto that later. Okay, Albie said, all matter is energy, and all energy is light. Thus, by an inference, we're all beings of light, because we're all made up of that. And this brings reference to this notion that we're all stardust. And I don't say we're stardust, I say we're starlight. Because we're all made from the thing that makes the stars. That made us. Everything on this planet. My glass, the cup of tea, everything. Even my sexy phone. It's all made of starlight. Starlight that's cooled to a certain moving pattern so that it becomes crustated, crystallized. Crystallized more appropriate when we get into the body system. I'm going to show you why. Okay, so energy. It's important that the energy in energy medicine is kind of, you've got this hold on it, this understanding that it's not about, energy means the ability to do work. And it's not really what we're talking about here. It's not about the power. David Bohm, who's fantastic, he talked about information being in formation. In other words, it was the signal patterns and the arrangement of signals that was key to this. And we'll all know this by, if there's any time you're speaking to your partner and you're in a heated point, you know that you could say something very poignant. And it doesn't have to be loud and go on for a long time and have lots of power. You could just say one little thing and it could crush somebody. Well, we all know that if we have sensitive mothers or partners. or ourselves. Someone can say something, delicate to us, and it hits right home. Small things have massive effects. They can do, and that's a key important point which we're going to get to. Another example to explain this is the surfer surfing on the wave. If you could analyze the physics of the wave itself will have recorded in it every aspect of that surfboard, the dimension of it, the weight pressure on it, all the aspects of the surfboard itself will be recorded within the wave. But the wave will never be able to tell you what color the surfboard was. And so within the wave and the carry wave of information, there can be hidden codes, hidden information that isn't encoded in the pressure of the wave. Okay? We're getting there. We're getting there. So Albert Szent-Györgyi was the teacher of my teacher. He was an MD in Budapest. He had his PhD from Cambridge. He won the Nobel Prize in 1937 for the synthesis of vitamin C. Later he said it was the worst thing he ever did because he took out of nature a key aspect of nature and used it in an isolation, and then people took it and ran with it. He got the Nobel Prize, and now everyone takes a vitamin C and ascorbic acid, but he later on felt that that lacks something, lacks some of the environment within which it was created, and thus informing our body systems when we ingest it as to what do we do with it. Again, we'll come to that later. He also was the first person to contract a muscle in a petri dish. So this guy was a ninja. Electrobiological, solid state biology. So he was really on the cutting edge of linking biology with physics, which of course we've been living in this scientific world that tended to separate things into blocks, mainly because it could manage and control. So later on in his career, he started to say this. He once observed a cat jump out at a snake, and if any of you've seen those videos where you put the cucumber behind the cat, I've never done it. I think it's quite cruel, but if you put like a cucumber or a hose behind a cat and it's just doing its thing, as soon as it turns around, it jumps up out of its skin. He observed this and he said, life is too rapid and subtle to be explained by slow-moving chemical reactions and nerve impulses. So he went on to say that the proteins are the stages upon which the drama of life unfolds. And the actors on this stage are none other than the small, highly mobile units such as electrons and protons. So electrons and protons. Electrons are negatively charged and they circle around the atoms. And protons are also known as hydrogen ions. A H plus is a proton. So that's the inside, protons and neutrons inside the nucleus, electrons on the outside. He also said that if a greater number of atoms can be arranged within a regular close proximity, for example in a crystalline matrix, our entire bodies are crystalline matrix, we'll go on to that. But in a crystalline matrix, like a crystal, that the single valency electrons that are bonded to a particular location cease to be located in a particular place and diffuse like a cloud that belong to the entire system. This is very important for things like tunneling, quantum tunneling, where electrons can bounce off. It's a bit like the swingy balls, you know, that like the 80s executives used to have on their desks, the swingy balls, boom, boom, boom. But when a ball came here and boom, it hit the charge of the balls here, the other ball on the end would pop off. It wouldn't go boom, 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 even though it kind of was doing that. So the point is that when we've got a crystalline matrix, electrons don't stay attached in the location where the atoms are. They diffuse and become available to the entire system. So Albert Szent-Györgyi had a student, that was Jim Oshman. He became my teacher. He wrote this fantastic, groundbreaking book, Energy Medicine, The Scientific Basis. It's an excellent, very simply, very articulately written book with fantastic references. Any energy medicine books that don't have references, So, you know, you really want to, because we're talking about the science basis of this. We need to have our references for things we talk about. Good. So check out that book, absolutely. So Jim talked about, he took Albert's work and he talked about the collagen. Collagen is the most abundant protein, the most abundant material in all living matter. It's also known as the connective tissue, and Jim also calls it the living matrix. So it's basically the building blocks of the entire system. And instead of this notion that the bones are there and everything hangs upon the bones, it's actually not the case. The collagen fiber is this plasmonic glue that holds everything together like a living matrix, and the bones actually end up floating inside the system of the body. And the muscles and the actin and the myosin, everything, all those wrap around in this spiraling way. So the living matrix extends through the body down into the center of the cells. Not even the nervous system goes into the center of the cells. We're going to talk about that in a minute. How the nervous system is completely different. It's a digital processing system, and the connective tissue is an analog processing system. Okay, we'll get on to them in a minute. Oh, it's also semiconductive, which basically means that it can move electrons under the right circumstances. So Jim talks about, in the body we have millions and trillions of cells that are instantly and intrinsically linked. They all know what's going on everywhere else in the body. And biology has really failed to explain this model. And I'll talk about a little bit of the history of why we failed to do it. Whew. Well, we're half past. I forgot we started at 20 past. That's great. We're 10 minutes in. Perfect. So I'll explain a little bit about how biology went on to create this model of separation. And you can see there in the top corner, I've got to re-switch my fingers. You can see in the top corner, can you see if I do that? No, you can't see that. Okay, so there where it's got limited and wrong, that is the cell version of biology. And that's in the old textbooks, how it used to be. The cell was this blob of sort of independent goo blobbing around the body. But actually what we find is it is intrinsically linked with the matrix, the living matrix, the connective tissue. The collagen fibers penetrate the cell walls and down into the DNA. We're going to talk about that and why it's important. So the overall body architecture is determined by this living matrix, as we just spoke about. The bones swim and float inside the matrix that is the body system. This liquid crystalline matrix is semiconductive, which, because it's helical, spiral, makes it piezoelectric. Now that means pressure electric. Piezo, pressure, electric, electric. Piezoelectricity is something that when you compress the substance, it generates electricity. And when you put electricity into it, it vibrates. The best example for those people who are old enough to remember the old record players, the LPs, where you put the record on the disc and you had the needle coming down. Every time the bump came up on the record, it would hit a piece of piezoelectric crystal, quartz, which is exactly how we power our computers and cameras and all that stuff, yeah, quartz. And so it would hit this, boom, 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 this piezoelectric material, this needle would bounce into it, and it would create a pressure wave, and electricity would flow along that, then that gets amplified, hence you've got your record player. Pretty interesting and sexy, yeah? Yeah. And our entire bodies are piezoelectric. Why this is very important is because sound, for one, we're not going to get into today because we just do not have the time, but sound is a pressure wave. So the sound of my voice is one atom hitting another, boom, 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 and then hitting your skin somewhere. That's why when you listen to music, you don't hear it with your ears like this. Oh, it's so lovely. You go like this. And you feel the entire thing through your being, because fundamentally your entire being is listening, because the pressure waves that are hitting all parts of your body, even behind you, are sending micro electrical signals into your body. Now, we don't feel them with our nervous system, which we're going to go on to and explain why we're not like totally aware of that in my left shoulder. So don't worry, it's going to get easier. This is one of my favorite cartoons. It's an ergonomic keyboard. Once you learn how to use it, it will increase your speed by 6%. Looks very appealing. Okay, so this is the standard biological understanding of of information moving through the body, the nervous system. So anyone who's done any biology is familiar with this notion. The point is, information starts at one end and gets conducted. It starts as chemicals, neurotransmitters, they go into the dendrites and then through into the cell body, and then that releases an electrical circuit which goes along the axon, and it actually jumps over the myelinated sheaths as a way of quickening, and then it goes out the other side, turns into neurotransmitters, and passes on to the next next block of information. And this is what Albert Sven-Yorgi was talking about when he said that the information moves too fast to be explained by the electrical circuitry of this, and then the slow-moving neurotransmitters that pop out either end of the nervous system. So, collagen, actin, myosin, keratin, and DNA, these are all connective tissues, and these are all in the analog category of information processing. This was digital. It's either emitting it or not. A neuron can't fire harder. It can either fire on or not fire at all. And what we do to interfere to change the firing of that, we either block the reuptake of the neurotransmitter, in other words, we keep it firing, or we block the receptor of where it's firing to, so we stop the communication. So those are two things, but we can't turn it up. There's no volume switch. It's a 0 or 1. It's a digital system. Whereas the connective tissue is an analog system. Analog systems are like the petrol gauge in your car, the gas gauge in your car. That if it was digital, it would say, you've got fuel, now you've not. Which wouldn't be much use, as we've just found out recently. So the analog system is it tells you exactly what's going on. And all these systems are analog. Okay, so it's at this area that I want to talk about the separation between digital and analog. This is the receptor cell firing threshold. And again, anyone who's done biology knows about this. We basically have signals that come into the body, and unless it passes a certain threshold, that -60 point that you see there on the thing, the cell does not fire, and your nervous system is not aware of it, and your conscious mind is not aware of it. So if something's touching your body, this is how mosquitoes land. They land, and they've not put enough information, enough signal onto your nervous system to generate the reaction of the cell, to generate a firing of the cell. And so they get away with it until they like fly off, or you happen to look down and there's blood everywhere. Anyway, on to the next one. So the question is, what happens to all that sub-threshold information? A lot of biologists say nothing, it's just wasted. But nature does not waste information. So the idea is this, that as the information comes into the receptor cell, it's split into the information that activates it, which goes to the neurological pathway, either on or off, and it goes to the connective tissue pathway, which is the analog system, the connective tissues, the collagen fibers, myosin, actin, RNA, DNA, all of that is piezoelectric, pressure electric, and so it's an analog system. So the connective tissue is analog, the neurological system is a digital system. This is the split. The receptor cell is the split of perception of where information signals come in and they get absorbed or they get moved to different locations. Okay, so we have these systems all through our body. One place in particular which I find very interesting is the eye. Because the eye has this duality split as well. This area of the eye and the iris and the cells in the eye that's looking, the areas are called the Muller cells. And these are connective tissues that also detect the information coming into your eye. Now again, we have this neurological system, whereas the eye only detects a certain amount of photons coming into the eye. And the cells in the eye have to be hit by a certain amount of photons in a certain amount of time in order to fire and send a signal. And if they're not, we don't see anything, it's black. But the Muller cells see everything. In fact, they can detect a single photon of light. So the eye is seeing things that our conscious mind is not seeing. These are facts of physics and biophysics. So the question is, when you look at somebody and you're looking and you see something, remember that you're looking with more than the conscious light that you're using to make the interpretation of what you're seeing. There's other things going on. So Aldous Huxley said, the body is a limiting device for consciousness. The body channels and filters perception into manageable amounts. This is true. And the cell, the receptor cell, is that doorway, that potential doorway to perception, that point where the split happens between the conscious and the subconscious. Because each second, our consciousness reveals to us a tiny fraction, about 60 bits of the 11 million bits of information it detects every second. So we're detecting 11 million bits, and our conscious mind is processing 60. So most of the information from our senses goes into the subconscious being, not the conscious mind, the living matrix. That's why we should trust our hunches and our intuitions, because they are so much more informed than we are. They have the 10,999,940 bits of information every second we don't have. Okay. So let's take a closer look at the cell walls as it appears in the cell in the living matrix, because this is important to take out of notion this idea that the cells themselves are bags of goo, separate from everything else. And interestingly, we've created society that seems to be this bag of this same model of, you're an individual person, you're just a separate entity, go about your business and carry on, like we had with the medical model of cells being separate from each other. We're not. We are interlinked, intertangled, and entangled. We'll get onto that in a minute. Okay, so this is the cell. It's got all these bits in it. This is easy, any biological textbook. Okay, mitochondria is a very important aspect. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of every cell. It's where we get our fuel from. And it only comes from our mothers, because it's in the tail of the sperm when we get created, and that gets chopped off by the egg. So really, every bit of mitochondria you have comes from your mother and your mother's mother. And actually there's a theoretical notion that the mitochondria is where you get your magic, your power, your mother's mothers. That's why witchcraft comes down through the mother. You know, different story, less scientific, but interesting. Look up. Okay, so this is what they used to do with the cells. They used to basically homogenize them. They would feed them into a system and spludge them so they were all the same. All the individuality was removed from them. Then they would take them and centrifuge them, put them in a big area and spin them around thousands of miles an hour fast, probably not that fast, but fast, spin them around so that the soluble bits would separate from the insoluble bits. And then what they would do is they would pour all the soluble bits away, well, they would pour actually all the precipitant away. So what we had is the insoluble structures such as the proteins, the keratin, the actin, the collagen, the myosin, the elastin, all that connective tissue stuff was basically just disposed of. It was just the precipitate, it was poured down the sink. Whereas what they wanted is all the soluble stuff, so the cells. So they were taking the cells and removing them from their natural environment and then studying them. This is an issue. You can't study something in isolation. So if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the precipitate. Yeah. Okay. This, of course, is counterintuitive, because you are doing something to realize something that you've already disabled yourself from doing. You're closing lanes to ease congestion. Doesn't make sense. Another Albert, he said, only two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the former. So this is what cells look like in their natural environment. They are those blobs there, and then around them, that is the connective tissue, which is a mesh which goes throughout them and within and throughout and into the other areas of the body. This is what the cell actually looks like. It's not that bag, but it is the signals, these wires coming across. And an important point is this area here, the cell membrane. And this is getting far more complicated as researchers now started to come on this, but this was the formation of it. By Mark Bruchter in '72, he discovered these things called integens, which were protein blocks which crossed over the cell membrane, and this connected the extracellular matrix, the collagen, the living matrix, to the intracellular matrix inside the cell, which is where, of course, all the DNA is. And this birthed or reconfirmed the birth of the epigenetics. Epi meaning above, genetics, genes. So above the genes, epigenetics is the notion that the environment influences the genes, going against the Francis Crick dogma of one-way information out of the cell, like it's just feeding signals and just ignoring everything else. What's actually happening is it's a two-way street. It's always this dualistic toroidal communication system. So this is the mechanism, or at least one of the mechanisms, that information comes into the cells across these integens, which cross the cell matrix and the cell membrane. So this is what they look like, the integens. They go across there, and then they go into the center of the DNA. And inside the center, inside the actual the cell, there are these microtubules, which are these tubes basically of information, and you have different they're made up of these different microtubule parts. There's tubulins, and the tubulins can either be polarized this way or polarized that way, and that is a digital encoding system inside the cell. So as the signals come in through the extracellular matrix, which is piezoelectric, so any signal, any sound, any wave, any touch, any electrical signal, electromagnetic or anything, comes into the body, gets absorbed by the collagen fiber, which the collagen goes everywhere. There's not one point that collagen doesn't go into. It goes everywhere, so everywhere is detecting, and that goes down across to the cell, across the cell through the integens, and then down into these microtubules, where it forms and grows these microtubules, which themselves are then encode in a digital way. So they've got the yin, the yang, the polarized up, polarized down, and then they've got these other things, these maps, these microtubule associated proteins, which can just sort of splodge in different places as like a sort of triad code system. And these form under the electrical signals that come into the cells. Now, one way that these can be and so they're forming information, they're coding information, and these microtubules go down and down and down into the center of the nucleus, down into the DNA, and that's the feed, that's the signal feed, like the hardwiring of our biological system, which is made up of the electrical information system encoding itself continuously. And one of the ways that a depolymerization can happen, which is a breaking apart of these microtubules, is through electromagnetic signals. That's important. Remember that. Electromagnetics, mostly magnetic fields. We'll get onto the reason why it's magnetics in a minute. Okay, Candice Pert. Your body is your subconscious mind. The molecules of emotion and their receptors are found in every cell in the body, and any state of mind is mimicked by the immune system. So our entire body is this encoding system. It's a hard drive backup system to the brain's encoding system, along with any other encoding systems that we might have elsewhere. But the body is a multi-encoding system, digital and analog encoding. Some very good books on this. The Genie in Our Genes by my friend Dawson Church, and of course The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. Excellent books. Bruce has made a reappearance on social media with regards to COVID and 5G. Check it out. There's some good interviews out there. It's a little controversial. We'll get onto 5G in a minute as well. All right. So we've talked about what's going on in the biological system. So we are information processors. And remember what I said about David Bohm and the information, that not always the signals will contain all the information that you can read from their waveform. It is also how the waveform is in a formation with other waveforms. There's codes upon codes. It's all fractal all the way down. All right. We also generate fields. This is the aura and the chakra. Oh, don't talk about auras and chakras. What are you talking about? I'll explain the science of it, the physics of it. It's very simple. So, the heart's field is the most powerful in the body. The electrical field of the heart is 60 times that of the brain, and actually the magnetic field of the heart is 5,000 times that of the brain's field. So the electrical magnetic fields are interlaced, and I'm going to explain why. The systems of electricity and magnetism are interlinked. That's why we've got the electromagnetic spectrum, not just the magnetic spectrum and the electrical spectrum. So there's a law of physics, it's called Ampere's law, it's one of the most famous. It says that any signal passing through a coil produces a magnetic field at right angles to it. It is a law, it happens. The entire body is signals of electricity, not only through the nervous system, firing those signals, fire, move, but also through the blood, which is iron, and the hemoglobin that moves through the body is like a conductor. We have electrical signals conducting, which is why the Matrix movie can work, because they, locks into the electrical conductivity of the human being makes, and they just feed off it. Okay. So our entire body is spirals, is coils. The connective tissue, coils. All the blood vessels spiral. All the muscles are spiral. The entire system is spiral, based in the same way the DNA is spiraled, on the golden ratio. Oh, no time to talk about the golden ratio. It's on the cover of my book, that spiral. But the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, seems to be a very key mathematical equation upon which the biological system is built. And I would suggest the psychological system, seeing as though music is also built on that same golden ratio. For those of you who want to look up more, check out Donald in Mathmagic Land. Uber cool cartoon from like the 70s or something. Anyway, any signal, electrical signal passing through a coil, generates a magnetic field. Good? Good. Next. This is what the electrical cardiogram looks like, electrical cardiogram of the heart, and a magnetocardiogram. So these are basically the magnetic field of the heart and the electrical field of the heart. And what you can see is they're almost identical. It's just the magnetic field has a little bit more information. And the reason for this is because magnetism passes, or magnetic fields, pass through the human body as if they're passing through the vacuum of space. In other words, as if the body wasn't there. The magnetic field just goes vroom, straight out. That's why it's important. The electrical field, on the other hand, goes through the path of least resistance. And so the electrical field generated from here might get stuck here and come out here. Or it might go through a muscle and blah, blah, blah. The point is, the cranium and all the other parts of the body absorb the electrical field, but the magnetic field gets out untouched. All right. So Ampere's law says any flow of electricity through a wire or a coil generates a subsequent magnetic field. Our entire body, blood vessels, muscles, fibers, bones, coils, they're all coils, and they have electrical signals flowing through them. So thus, we are a massive, continuous magnetic field generator. All right? And you saw from that slide below that any electrical signal, the electrical signal that generated the magnetic signal is identical. So the magnetic fields that we're generating have all the information in them that the electrical signals have. So take, for example, the brain. You've got an electrical signal that says, oh, there's my beloved. That's a firing. That firing generates a subsequent magnetic field which leaves my body as if my body wasn't there. All right? So it comes out. The question is, what happens to those fields? We'll get to that. So Faraday's law of induction also says that any magnetic, magnet moving near coils can produce a current flow. So it's kind of reverse as well. So if you've got magnetic fields moving through coils, you can also generate these fields, which is why you can do sort of spin magic and feel weird things by spiraling your body. Why dance is so interesting. There's another aspect of physics, and it's a little slightly odd one, but it's called the transverse Hall effect. It says this: any semiconductive spiral, remember collagen, muscle, DNA, RNA, actin, myosin, they're all semiconductive spirals. The transverse Hall effect says any semiconductive spiral is sensitive to biomagnetic fields. All right? So not only are we generating magnetic fields, we are also completely designed to detect magnetic fields. But we know it's not in the digital system of the nervous system because that will be under the threshold of the cell receptor firing. So it feeds into our subconscious system or our unconscious system. It's part of those 10,999,940 bits of information that we are not aware of every second. All right. No talk here these days is complete without just mentioning 5G. The reason why 5G is important, and I don't know if you can see this big enough on the screen, but basically on this electromagnetic spectrum on the right, you can see where the 5G has been identified there in the wavelength. And on the one on the left, the reason why 5G is so risky at the moment is not because of the heating effects, which is what the chemical engineers start talking about. Oh, it doesn't warm you up, so it should be okay. Fuck that. It's not about warming you up. It is about interfering with the communication system of the body. Now look where 5G lands. It lands very close to where the infrared energy of the cell is communicating. So in that whole infrared signal area, all the cells and all the biological systems operate inside the infrared spectrum. And right there, the 5G is ebbing right onto the infrared spectrum. So it's getting close to us. It's going to have some impact on our biological system. And for more information on that, maybe you can look at some of the work of Beverly Rubik. She's shown that 4G can clump blood cells, but of course no one's really got the signal generators for 5G at the moment to be able to do the research, and they're just putting them all out there. So research, don't scare, but research. And the notion is that they are interfering with the subtle nature of the biological system. That's why these signals can be important. All right. My little cat friend here says, but hold on. Aren't electromagnetic fields far too weak to have any effect? In fact, that's true. There was one quote, listening to the heart's magnetic field amongst the background radiation would be like trying to listen to an ant's footsteps at a rock concert. It's true. We are swamped with millions and millions of electromagnetic frequencies, and a lot, this is a very important point, a lot we have never had in our evolution before, like 5G. 5G has never been on this planet before. And that's why it's dangerous, because we do not know its effect on us. But aside from that, we've all this Wi-Fi. These signals have not been on the Earth before. So we as human beings have started to have to adapt to electromagnetic signals that have never been here. But that's right, Catty. Small things, these electrical fields from the heart and from the brain and from the body, they're tiny. So what impact could they possibly have? Well, I'm glad you asked, Catty. So Ilya Plurganati, I think he was Italian, but he could have been Persian. He said that living systems are highly non-linear, which means they're not in a straight line. He went on to say a very small amount of applied energy can produce a larger flow of energy and matter within an organism. This is now an understanding of physics and quantum biology, is that tiny things can have massive effects. Tiny things, and bless her, May Wan Ho, the rainbow and the worm. She's a fantastic biophysicist, unfortunately died a few years ago, but what a brilliant scientist and a brilliant being. Please look up her work. May Wan Ho, the rainbow and the worm. She looked at how information and signals and light was going through organisms and found that the more coherent the areas, the more light passed through, and the more light passed through, the more complex areas. So instead of the simpler areas, less complex, allowing the light through, it was actually the more complex areas that let the light through more. That's because they were more coherent. We have to talk about coherence in another day. The point is there is information that's moving, and tiny things can have massive cascading effects upon the quantum system and thus upon the grand normal system. Ross Ade also talked about what's known as a frequency power window. He found that cells have a particular signal that they react to, that more of that signal doesn't make them react more, and a greater wavelength doesn't make them react more, but there's a specific point where they are listening for. This is why the 5G, because cells are very close, their communication is right on the edge of that infrared, right where 5G is coming into, and so that's where the danger might come. Rosade also found that amplification enables fields of millions of times weaker than the membrane's potential to modulate the cellular activities. And we're finding that now in updated work on the ion channels of the cell. There's a lot of stuff coming out of that, a lot of exciting stuff. So he went on to say that modern biophysical research has confirmed that tissues respond to very tiny energy fields of appropriate frequency, intensity, and pulse shape. It's 8 p.m. here, so there's the howling. So what Rosade said, that if you're not getting the results that you want, try less energy and shorter treatments. There's also a key here about pulsing. Pulsing is a key to communicating with the cell. There's a famous study of how cells divide, how they move, and it was a very clever study with a disc with a hole in it spinning, and basically enabled them to pulse light at a cell. And they found that cells that they pulsed light at mitosis separated and grew more than if they just shone the same light directly at them. So it's the on-off, just like in music. If music was just one tone, if Myrid had come on and just, it wouldn't be any music. It's the it's the pulse. It's the information that gives key to how signals are interpreted and what is the breath in of that information and what effects they have. So these tiny things can, yes, have massive effects. They don't have to be big. They can have big impacts on the world. Remember that. Tiny things can have massive effects. And in this time, actually, this is the most important thing to remember. We want to make big changes to the world. We want to change the world. We want to blah, blah, blah. As Swami Bhayandananda says, we don't need to change the world. We just need to nappy train it. Back to the point. Tiny things have massive effects. So if you make a change within yourself, a tiny change within yourself, tiny with respect to the world and the universe, you can have a massive cascading effect on the rest of the world. Think about it. All right. So we mentioned the quantum. We're going to talk more about the quantum. We've got about 20 minutes left, I hope. Spitting out some truths. Yeah, thanks, Ali. All right, so something about the quantum world. John Wheeler says, if you're not completely confused by quantum mechanics, you don't understand it. I like that. All right. Two aspects you're going to need to look up. These are wave-particle duality and entanglement. I'm going to tell you so briefly. Wave-particle duality is this, that matter, physical matter, is not always physical. If you look at it, it changes its behavior than if you're not looking at it. And they study this by passing signals, electrons through gates, through... Yeah, I'll have to look it up. I tell you what's a good cartoon for it is What the Bleep Do We Know with Wolf. Wolf does a cartoon, What the Bleep Do We Know, wave-particle duality. Look it up. It's very good at explaining it. But the point is that things change when you look at them. Our impact changes the world. The other one I want to talk about is entanglement. And the reason this is important is because it means that everything's connected. Entanglement is if you had two ions, two atoms, and they were together. And in order for them to stay together, they have to be spin neutral. Like one spin is the opposite of the other spin. So they're spinning opposite. Is that opposite? Yeah, that's opposite. Now, if you split them apart, they're still, where are we? They're still spinning opposite. Now, if you take them 20 miles apart, they're still spinning opposite. If you change the spin of this one automatically changes to be the opposite spin. Nobody has any idea how that's happening. It's a fact of quantum physics, a repeatable fact. Nobody's got a clue how it does it. What's more, the speed at which this information moves is 26,000 times the speed of light. I'll say that again. 26,000 times the speed of light. But didn't Einstein said that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light? No, he didn't say that. He said nothing can accelerate to being faster than the speed of light. He didn't say anything about things that were already moving faster than the speed of light, or to the quantum tunneling effect, which he called spooky action at a distance. Look this up as well. Now, why is this important? Because if we all came from one point in time, the Big Bang, or the Big Suck, as Bill Nelson calls it. I love that, because there was nothing and it sucked into itself. If we all came from this one point, then we were all entangled with each other. Everything in the universe was in one point and space and time with itself. Thus, it's still forever intrinsically linked. All right. Heisenberg said, what we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. Right, 15 minutes. Einie said, a human being is part of the universe, experiences itself separate from the rest through a form of optical delusion of consciousness. This is all spiritually very important, but we're on the science now, so let's keep going. So the body is entangled with itself. This is a great piece of research by HeartMath Institute, Roland McCarthy. This is a great study. Basically, what they did is they hooked people up to sensors, and then they had a pause, a blank screen, and then they showed them either a picture of a bunny rabbit or like a snake. A picture of a bunny rabbit, snake. They showed them like a peaceful scene or an emotional scene, and they mapped the body system. And what they found was this, that the heart rate changed significantly before the image was shown, depending on what the image was going to be. So if you were going to get a snake image, the heart went just before the image was displayed. And nobody knew what the image was going to be displayed. It was random by the computer. So the heart somehow was predicting, was looking forwards in space and time and predicting to prepare you for the impending shock. They also found that females seem to be more attuned to this information than males. And this was the result. They concluded this from the result of the research. Yeah, usually I have a live audience and people are laughing at that, but I suppose there's no one here but me. Okay, so important to know is that the quality of the matrix determines our ability to process information, right? We know that everything's entangled now, everything's linked physically and electromagnetically, okay? But if there's blocks and stuff on there, then information can't communicate and the body can't do its harmonious thing. So one of the things that gets in the way of this communication system is inflammation. And inflammation now seems to be the top cause of most diseases. So this emerging hypothesis is that virtually all chronic disease is caused by focal chronic inflammation. Donald Imberger said that many unrelated diseases in virtually all fields of medicine and surgery have a common dependency on an abnormal cell behavior triggered by local inflammation. Okay, so what is inflammation? Inflammation, we've heard of free radicals. Free radicals are these things that are missing electrons. They are starving of electrons, and they basically go and they destroy healthy cells to get the electrons. So we need to take in antioxidants, which have extra electrons, to mop them up. But in the inflammation area, the body locks off the area that's inflamed, and so these antioxidants can't get through. The only things that are small enough to get through are electrons themselves. So electrons can come in and mop up the free radicals, which reduce the inflammation. We can get these electrons from the earth, these earthing electrons. Oh, have we got time? Okay. Basically, remember what Albert Sven-Yorgi said about the coherent structure, lattice structure, electrons delocalize. Well, when you've got a coherent structure of water around all the protein and the collagen fibers, every collagen fiber in the body, the connective tissue, is surrounded by coherent structure of water. The water itself orders itself so that the protons, the hydrogen ions, H2O, detach from the covalent bonds, and they start to become like clouds of shared information. And they're clouds of shared information in this hydrated sheath around the connective tissue. So you've got protons moving in the water one way and electrons moving in the conductive, semiconductive nature of the conductive tissue, the living matrix, moving the other way. So you've got this mechanism. This is James Oshman's second book. 10 minutes left. Thanks, Alison. All right, so we're just going to talk a little bit about water. Jerry Pollock first became well known for his book, Cells, Gels, the Engines of Life. It's great, British scientist up north in Washington. His latest book is The Fourth Phase of Water, and he's talking about this exclusion zone water. It's a very interesting factor. And what he shows is that When water is placed next to a hydrophilic, water-loving surface, it starts to build up this, this patterning, this organization. The water itself organizes, and what happens is you get these bulk water, it's called, but you get these little channels of exclusion zone where nothing is in. And as you can see on this map, all those impurities there get pushed out. So there's like this exclusion zone. And we have these coherent structures of water. Every part of the body is hydrophilic, is water loving. So this water everywhere in our body, we know we're 78 to 90% water. All this water in the body is this exclusion zone water, which basically means it's hyper organized, hyper structured water. So this is what it looks like when you put a proton dye in it. Remember what protons are? Hydrogen ions. The amount of loose hydrogen ions in the water are detected by the intensity of this color. So what you've got here is this nephron at the bottom, which is a hydrophilic substance. We're trying to mimic what's inside the body. And then straight away you've got an intense amount of hydrogen ions, and then it gets less and less and less. But right at the bottom you see you've got that very clear line which shows that there actually are no hydrogen ions right in that area, because that is the exclusive bit. So it offers like this buffer zone between the intense concentration of hydrogen ions, H+, and on the other side, the potential of the electrons moving from the conductivity of the collagen fibers around which the water surrounds. So then you have this battery effect, where you've got positive on one side and negative on the other. You have a current. You have a potential current if it can get across. The other thing that's very interesting about this exclusion zone, and I'm just giving you a tip of the iceberg, is that when you shine near infrared light, remember near infrared, that's where all the cells work and everything like that, the exclusion zone increases. And what that means is the potential across the areas where the electrons are and the hydrogen ions are increases. So you get this battery effect, this increase potential between the connective tissue and the collagen fiber. There's also an ability of this to decontaminate water, to offer a buffer zone between water. Exclusion zone inside the body separates these contaminations. And as I said, you can take water and you can take this in times of the connective tissue and you can generate power from it. So this is potentially a way that the body system itself generates electricity, energy from the sun. This is like maybe sun gazing explanation. This is the body's photosynthesis, is the exclusion zone water, and creating a polarity between the hydrated connective tissue where the electrons flow, E-, and the water, the hydrated exclusion zone water, where the hydrogen ions, proticity, flow. All right? So, sum up. The heart is the biggest electromagnetic field in the body, and it can predict the future. We generate electromagnetic fields which we can affect our biological system with these fields. Through our intent, our thoughts and our intents and our emotions are encoded into the electromagnetic fields, in particular the magnetic fields, which can be detected by the hydrated spiraling proteins of the body, the connective tissue, the collagen fiber. We have emotional memory, epigenetics, which can be stored inside the living matrix, inside the cells, the muscles, the walls, and then down into the DNA. Remember, in those microtubules, which form the little microtubule associated proteins and the tubulins, up, down, in that form, that encoded form, which can be destroyed by magnetic fields. 5G. What's happening? We don't know. Let's research it. Inflammation causes most diseases, and electrons can reduce the inflammation. Where can we get them? Straight from the earth, or from a healer. Someone's touch. They have got electrons and they're passing them to you. That's why sometimes when healers are doing work, they feel drained, because they're not replenishing their electron supply. So if you're feeling down, get yourself in the earth, feet in the earth, grounded. There's a whole work on earthing James Oshman is working with at the moment. You can get biomats, which you sleep earthed to the ground. You put them on the bottom of the bed and you either put them to a wire outside the earth and plug it into the ground, or use the earth rod in your house. I'm not so sure about that, mainly because of the 60 hertz frequency of the electrosmog that's coming through. So research that. Water self-orders itself and it buffers between electron flow and proton flow, proticity, creating this battery power within the body, which increases with sunlight. Near-infrared light increases the gap between these two and the potential of energy harnessing in the body. So get your sunlight, your vitamin D. Oh yeah. Exclusion zone walkers could explain this sort of solar-powered energy that is the transmuter of the body, converting information and energy into the body. All right, I have a book. It's for edge runners who want to know more about the world. It's an introduction. Here it is again. It's an introduction, but it's a very well referenced introduction. I even have cartoons. It's a thick book. It's like a textbook, but it's got cartoons and it's got other fun stuff. Here you can see this is I'm explaining the wave particle duality. Anyway, check it out. Bookevolve.com. What else we got? Oh, special offer on. Special offer on the book. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure. I don't know what's going on in there, but this is also on YouTube and Facebook. I'll leave you with a sonic boom. It's a picture of a sonic boom. And here before, while we've got questions, this is a whole load of great references to look up. Right. Any questions from the crowd? Any questions from the crowd? I think not. Right now I'm going to stop streaming on all those mediums. Thanks very much. Tune in. My next shows, the interview shows, the live inspirational community collaboration shows are going out next week, May 18th. Thank you.